Hello, Beyond All Reason watchers. In today's game, we're going to be watching a more refined naval play from myself. This is perhaps my 10th time playing naval. In the end, I have a very low APM. I see in the score, like 20. It was early morning. I was half asleep and I didn't really even care. So it dawns on me actually with these games and how non-frenetic I was. When you hardly care is when you actually do play better. You know, it's not ideal to panic or fret. The flow of the play should be quite directional and you're aware of the map and enemy forces and respond accordingly. Now the position we end up with is in the open navy position on Supreme Isthmus. We have a quick open access to the sea here. I like to set down 3 mexes, a good amount of wind turbines, say 5, and personally I'm a fan of building an energy storage as well. Otherwise, low wind can really harm your momentum. If you didn't think I was a noob, this proves it. I sort of stutter here because I'm a little bit distracted by positioning my shipyard and I leave this unconstructed. One thing you can do with a shipyard placement is you can use, I think, the left and right click on grid or even default. It moves the position of the shipyard, but it can be really glitchy to do that. Sometimes it has a really non-optimum way of positioning the shipyard on the default, so be prepared to practice that a few times so in a ranked game you're not sort of held up for 10 seconds while it glitches out on you. So we see my adversary, Frittle SVK, putting down the shipyard in a pretty traditional position here. This position does have the advantage of having the island for protection against flanking. If you put down a few torpedo launchers here, you can build a small economy quite safely and shipyard, so it has got that advantage, this position. Also, it's far away from the enemy. Back at my base, we do see the 4th mech's finally being built. I like to get this out after my first constructor. Now, a build order I'd recommend in this position is to build that first constructor right away, have it assist the second constructor to do the mexes, and then build a submarine followed by 2 herrings. At this point in the game, we can see my opponent builds the 3 early dolphins. Quite a common play I actually see is using these dolphins. I never have success with them, and I never see the enemy have success with them, because despite the fact they do have a lot of output, they're used in this fashion is to smash right into my shipyard, which can absurdly work. And unfortunately, the way I've set up my patrol, these guys have just missed these dolphins coming in, but I am feeling like something's going to be incoming. So I moved this frigate out to the centre right away, and I think getting an early unit out there, I've waited till the frigate, but it might even be a submarine, just to get that visibility in the centre for this early push. I still do see it enough time to do something about the attack. It's a little bit unfortunate with the way I sent out all my forces at once, but that clutch submarine worked a treat. Now these dolphins do a disgusting amount of damage to the base, and I think even their secondary explosion caused a lot of damage. If your enemy does bring your shipyard down with that early attack, because they've donated 300 metal to you, that should ease your concerns about having to rebuild the shipyard and any losses incurred. So always a danger with an early dolphin attack. This is what I like to use my commander for personally, is the fantastic amount of build power, 300, to build some early economy in the sea. It's almost the same as 3 constructors. So 3 constructors, that's saving you 600 metal. Rather than having to build that, use your commander. So this game does get really interesting with what my other players and teammates do especially. We see an early commander death. I'm not too sure what happened there. Just got a little bit too aggressive, I think. And how this commander is fending off the aggression with a fairly small amount of units is quite interesting. I'm going to keep an eye on that later. And also we're going to keep an eye on what happens here with the naval war between Broken Open Skill and White Lies. It's quite an interesting naval battle. For now, we're going to focus in on our little fight, particularly what Frittle's doing, is now bringing down a small naval force, which is well scouted, thanks to my radar I did get up, so I'm able to position ideally. I pretty much just bring my subs down for attack, and I think fortunately I end up on this side, harassing the frigates, and away from the enemy subs, which assault my frigates, I guess. Yep, so these herrings act as effective tanks really. Well, not the most effective tanks, but see, they don't get hit by a lot of shots because of their small size. Just not perhaps microed as well as they could be. We easily cleaned that up in the end. I'm not going to say I had a huge advantage of forces. I think it was substantial, particularly having the destroyer on the field. But I think frigates and subwires were pretty evenly matched, and I can see we came well out on top for whatever reason. Oh, there's still some subs there. Will we make it? Yeah. So again, sub plays got to be more aggressive with the destroyer, and I think with the herrings, perhaps need to assign them to another subgroup if the enemy is using a lot of subs. Otherwise, they'll just pop like that. Now I bring down my handy constructor on subgroup 4 for a quick reclaim of this, what I think may be a contested metal field, and also I'm dry out of metals, so that's the time to reclaim when you just suck in all the metals up. So after this fight, my destroyer's hardly touched and's got 5 kills. I think it was a little bit fortunate. However, you can see that one early destroyer can be quite effective, especially against submarine fleet, also for some standoff fire. I think a combined force with destroyers and frigate is the way to go, rather than just having frigates or just having destroyers, which some people tend to do. One thing I might have a little bit too much in my build is too many herrings perhaps, but if you successfully reclaim them you only lose about 80 or so metal, so it's not the biggest deal and they do draw a lot of fire. On the other hand, my frigate survived here and worth a lot more metal. I positioned right on this wreck yard as we cleaned it up just to make sure I owned it and scooped up all that metal. Now, interestingly, this player has gone for very heavy sub builds still, especially with eels, which aren't nearly as good as the Cortex counterparts, and is going for a destroyer, I believe, which might be actually the right call. My set repeat build order at this time is 2 submarines to 2 assault frigates, to an oppressor, to 2 herrings, to a constructor ship, and a death cavalry. This might be a little bit OTT in constructor ships, even in death cavalry, but you know, it's good to have a couple of early ones just in case we do have a contested wreck field to quickly get in there. Also, I could probably do with an extra orca in this build order list. This build order list is a pretty good build order for a combined arms early fleet, and you know, depending on how many constructors you have or death cavalry, you get rid of these. I would say not too many here, maybe 3 is enough, and the same with the resurrection subs, maybe even just 1 early on, but 2 or 3. Now after I claim that wreck field, I come back up to the centre and we see the enemy has sort of sighted me. They actually pulled back here to their radar, protecting it, and even facing the wrong direction. I think it's a little bit of a mistake. What naval players do is they bring their forces in too far forward to the opposing force, and they really allow themselves to be surprised. A little trick you may not be aware of as a newer player is I run hot groups. So 1 for my frigates, 2 for destroyers and herrings, 3 for my submarines, and 4 for my forward construction ship, and 5 for my resurrection subs, which aren't quite with me yet. And they've just been reclaiming and repairing and doing it in lieu of the res subs. In actual fact, I'm not sure if resurrection subs are needed this early on. Construction craft can do good enough job, and they can also put up a few urchins. They're a bit more all-rounder. The one thing they can't do, of course, is do a sneaky wreck steal. So just get the resurrector subs maybe on an alt tab rather than into your build order. So that's running hot groups, which is super important during naval engagements to be able to run formations and everything without just clicking like a madman. And also another thing it allows you to do is it allows you to just have a rally point at the base, which means that this base can be pretty well defended most of the time, and also it allows to keep your ships somewhat safe, or you're aware of the reinforcement line when it comes. So often I see players throwing away ships because of too an aggressive reinforcement line. Navy's all about trading space for ship hull, basically. Space is cheap, ship hull not so much. You want to conserve that. And so what the hot groups allow you to do is you can zoom out, you can select your hot group, and then you can press Q, and it selects all on the screen, and then you control 1, 2 or 3, whatever it might be appropriate for that hot group. Also, if you're resurrecting wrecks, it allows you to bring those ships up also rather than remain forgotten about, so it's got that sort of dual use. So back in the base, we see this T2 constructor, which has been, I think, bought, but maybe gifted from the eco player. Start to build my T2 mexes and build some reactors. Now let's see this attack unfold. We can see it's got a really good element of surprise because the enemy hasn't realised they're facing in the wrong direction. So straight in with the submarines, with the screens, and for some reason standing off with my destroyers, I'm just not getting in my head that destroyers should be first. I'm still a believer in putting the herrings in the same group because they can dodge torpedoes rather well. So I'm forming up on the base. I see I'm weirdly getting sniped at by this destroyer, so I come in to act as a screen while my destroyers sit off and bombard, and bring in my subs in to assist. Quite a few torpedoes hitting me, and I think that, oh no, they managed to survive. No, one's taken down. Right away after that destroyer's gone, I should have brought these guys in straight away to contest the subs. Of course, my submarines help out a lot by contesting this sub army and allowing me to get enough damage on point. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble, possibly relying on my anti-sub damage with one destroyer. We can see how well two destroyers fend them off, particularly the Armada ones. So that's 14 minutes, enemy base kaput. It was a frightful production of submarines it had, with those construction turrets reclaiming the metal right away and then putting it through the base really quickly. That's why attacking the base, you've always got to have quite an advantage, and if you don't see a clear advantage, just back off. I mean, I'm mostly okay, but that was not far away from having to retreat. So we see the repair going down straight away. Now, what I perhaps should have done if it wasn't a enemy base I was getting rid of, it was so important to focus down that base with such low health ships, is I should have brought these guys back to a sort of forward operating base, as it were, where these constructors are. These constructors in the meantime could have put down an urchin or something like that as well to help me if I had to retreat, but they can quickly repair the ships back up to full health. Even Resurrector subs can as well. I think they can repair surface ships. And here they come, just in time to sweep up this whole base. Just be aware of this, your Resurrector subs. If you make the, I suppose, reclaim area too large, it will tend to suck up these giant plants and give you energy you don't need. Now down here we see a naval base get slammed down right away. A pretty typical play. So when I get map dominance, after repairing and going back and working on eco and doing a few different things, I'm trying to bring out my subs, as you can see, to patrol or at least have sight lines on the whole coastline. Subs are great, of course, because they can't be damaged by the enemy artillery. My herrings, I've just made these align to just see if anything pops up quickly. It might be an amphibious attack or an air attack, and can assist with both. So these subs have pretty quickly seen this base getting laid down. So they should have put the construction turrets up here, and that's super easily, even these patrol subs have shut that down without my surface ships even having to contest. That's why I keep my surface ships, is just in case this base does get a little bit of traction. But if we have enough submarine coverage, that shouldn't happen. Also, what the air player done then, I think is pivotal, but try and scout this cliff here to make sure they're not building a heap of building constructors just ready to put down an instant base, somehow get rid of my submarine and build out a navy in 30 seconds flat. Can always happen. Now I'd prefer to keep a few more ships up and about and eco building and everything like that, and keep these surface ships maybe up to this point after I take down that base, bring them back for a claim, because we're working on a flagship at just after 18 minutes, which is pretty early for a contested sea game. One thing I have produced too many of is T1 constructor turrets. So hey, with this build order, maybe don't build any constructor turrets, just alt a few in as required. I know I take that back about the constructors. That was actually part of my plan, was to build about 8 or 10 constructors or so. I don't even think I built that many, to really assist this naval sea economy and scale up a little bit. So it's the 22-minute mark, and we can see our eco player has gone for a timing amphibious push with only just 2 aphises, and that's fine. That's what eco should be doing, is assisting the front and putting pressure on the enemy, particularly with an early sea wind like this, to 100% exploit the surprise rather than the enemy seeing this amphibious attack coming from a long distance and panicking. Also, we see the Geo, which doesn't quite have the same economy, putting out these poison arrow, very heavy amphibious tanks. I'm not sure what I think of these. Obviously, they're pretty cool. They've got a decent range on them, actually. Yeah, massed, I think they're much cooler than just dribbled in. I think dribbled in, they are quite vulnerable. The main issue they've got, just building a heap of them and bringing them forward, is they're basically more expensive harbours, because look at that line of sight compared to their range. They need to be mixed in with a longer range troop. So Eco says, can you check mines with the hulls of your tanks? Mr. Sarix agrees. Now this would be one of the better Marauder pushes I've ever seen, and that's saying something, because Marauder push guys usually do a pretty good job of it. They know what's up. And as good as these 9 or so tanks are, it's not nearly enough. Whereas a 20, only 13 Marauders, is it? Yeah, there's only 13 Marauders here, but they managed to split it up nicely. They don't stop, they just keep on moving and blowing shit up. These Marauders over here are avoiding the sudden defences, these pit bulls. They make a mockery of this defence line, the enemy Eco's whole base. Poor Divine Evil, which really had quite a good response to that, all things considered, just gets out-microed here. And the Marauder's gone all the way down to Geo, and I think it's going to blow up the advanced power plant. Kaboom! Somewhat successful Marauder attack. I didn't see it, but we can see the tank hulls here, the poison arrow wreckage. These bullpups, defended against that really well. So that's the problem with these tanks, are just a little bit too slow, and of course need that unit that helps them with the sight as well. Otherwise, you might as well just have built harbours. Now the 26-minute mark, my flagship's finally done, coming down to provide assistance, just in time. Now we see a couple of Marauders also come around this side and lay wreck to this naval base. And we've got this player pushing up, in quite a lot of trouble, so the air's having to come get involved, but the flagship popping these guys, it's just too much damage for them. These Sheldon balls are very vulnerable to longer range artillery. So although the flagship is infamous for coming down here and laying waste to all this base here, the Marauder's sort of done that job for us. So I'm assisting on the front line, and this is what else the flagship is quite good at, is beating this Sheldon ball meta, which is absolutely devastating to these ground units, but against the flagship they just pop like crazy. And that's what I find with artillery, it gets out-teched super quick, and these players have a hard time then transitioning up to T3 because these are getting popped all the time. They need to build new ones, and we see the same with Starlights. We'll see those pop as well. Oh look, there's this Marauder sort of blocked in by the shredders. Hero Marauder with 80 kills. What a pain in the butt unit. They probably need to get nerfed in some ways, Marauders. Even on ground maps they're devastating. Yeah, see, easily popped. Only one needs to hit them, and they all pop at once. These dudes are expensive, 420 each. Very brave. They're coming up to hit my flagship. Good luck. Our air's got a lot of wasps. Tell you what, I've got very much a hero team. Now, their air is actually saving the day here because they're building out a whole heap of spam to push off that inevitable defeat as long as possible. You don't really see air players do this, and I wish more would. Could read the game and understand the rest of their players not doing so well and need help with the ground. But we see perhaps a consequence of that is losing the air battle to a degree. Fortunately, these guys have some shredders, which I think is always a good idea to have. Yeah, so I'm looking for better targets than the endless series of grunts. But they do pop like crazy, and I see them here in the Starlights. Kaboom. And so super expensive at 1200 metal. Will they affect the game? Trying to get away from my flagship. Oh my god. Was that a chain reaction? I think it was. They don't even give much metal because it's so absolutely exploded. So really having a flagship on the front line can be mega effective. I actually thought in this I wasn't playing that well because I didn't have enough scouting, it felt like sometimes, and I just couldn't see, like this for example, right? I just couldn't quite see it until I suddenly could, and then he is devastating this flagship. Even if it's just radar only, I think that's good enough. And I think like these starlights, for example, I'm not sure I could actually see them. I think it was perhaps just the radar I was firing at, not exactly sure what I was even firing at the time. So that's it. So we can see also eco is coming down with spam. I might have asked for it actually. So very effectively combating the eco spam, and altogether was just too much. Even this C was taken. So we had both Cs, everything blown up here, and game ending at 32 minutes. If we cruise over to the damage efficiency, so it's 548%. I can see here with a lowly 23 actions per minute. So if you want some impressive looking stats, guys, try and own a C and very slowly click through it. You don't need to be some sort of frenetic player to affect the game quite a lot, just so long as you don't make too many mistakes, I guess. So next I'm going to have a little bit of a look at what happened in the C, which was actually very interesting because my players, I was on either a star team, and it can feel like that sometimes. You've got an absolute star team despite the balance and everything in the lobby, but seriously I just think it's just luck of the draw sometimes, but also it's just morale. Once you can detect you're on a bit of a win, you can free up your play. You don't have to be such a conservative player, and you can affect the game a lot more effectively that way. So now we're going to watch the contest between White Lies and Broke Open Skill in the South Sea. Primarily we'll look at this because it was quite an interesting game where White Lies I thought would have had the advantage from all the naval contests, but Broke Open Skill built such a stellar economy that could effectively fight back. And I want to analyse this more into the future, is how well some Navy players can still scale while contesting the sea effectively, even in some cases not contesting at all. That might be my next video, how this one player didn't contest at all for like 20 minutes, put down an instant Navy and pretty much wiped me out. So yeah, we're going to look at this sort of build order fairly closely because it's a model eco that Broke Open Skill rolls with. So part of it is perhaps building 5 Lazarus, which seems like an insane amount to me because there's still a substantial cost at 130. Sends them to reclaim energy when the energy's full, so we're not seeing an optimized build yet. But what it's allowing to do is just have this commander with the 300 build power sit on the bot lab and produce like crazy. So I think there was 4 construction bots into crossbows, which is interesting. So we've got the Hercules transporting a crossbow straight to the island. These Lazarus are pretty much just harvesting energy, I think. Obviously they're probably trying to snare some metal at the same time. And that gets us out of having this geothermal power plant not up yet. So the Hercules comes up after putting down the crossbow there. Maybe it was just used as a bit of a scout. I know, I'm wrong. Coming over to the island chain, or where are you taking that commander? So we've got a 5-minute timing here on that naval base going up, which is pretty late. We can see at the exact same time we've got herrings. I can't think of what it is, to be honest with you, but we could have a substantial rush force up by then. So let's see how quickly this goes down. So build a mechs, radar, and into the shipyard. We've kept these construction turrets. I'd like to see these moved over to this naval base by now to assist in the building, but we've been able to eat up that bot lab. Not before it's helped out with building these 10 energy converters to assist the energy coming off this geothermal. So it's got a small force here, really stopping a very basic amphibious push, which is super popular for the enemy to do. So I understand why Broke Open Skill has gone for that. Yeah, so that's the only difference I'd do. As soon as we reclaim the bot lab, I would have put these construction turrets, transported them over to the shipyard. We wouldn't have that glut of metal then. We see these construction bots also not really tasked up properly. So it's not a super optimized build, but it still does quite well. And we go early into Dolphins, which I think is a disastrous play. But I guess it's good against early aggression. Dolphin's pretty good against a lone destroyer. I guess it was the right play. The enemy obviously had submarines, so perhaps an early destroyer or a few submarines might have been a better selection. So we've got sort of 2 destroyers versus a whole heap of Dolphins. But at least Broke Open Skill hasn't committed to a suicide attack, which I see people do all the time with Dolphins. They're pretty much like hyenas, Dolphins. If you can get in your head like that, like you're there to prey on the out-of-line vessel or something like that. You don't go against an enemy fleet with these guys. So it's actually White Lies contest this island first, which is surprising to me because Broke Open Skill had the advantage on the economy. And here we see why, and perhaps the reason for keeping these construction turrets at base, was to get this T2 as early as possible and support it very quickly. So there you go, that's why they kept the construction turrets there. You see it's a very interesting attack randomly, which is actually going to be super useful. Wipe themselves out, of course, and could have done with taking out these construction turrets as well. But there you go, still substantial effect. So we've got 20 metal produced compared to 80. No. Yeah, like 47. So this is a substantial economy difference. It always comes down to this T2 constructor bot. These T2 mixers give out so much more metal than the T1. It's just crazy. It's 2.3 compared to 9.2 for every single one. And because there's 5 mexers here, that's a big gain. Now, sort of the only issue with this Canyon shipyard build is, and putting the commander down there, is you don't have the 2 mexers here. Although don't forget, if you're running the Canyon and you've got some defences, definitely upgrade these to T2 as well as soon as you can. We see that happening right away actually, before these are even done. Oh yeah, so the commander is working on it and leaving the other T2 to work on it themselves. Now White Lies is saying at the 12-minute mark, who's selling T2? Yeah, so White Lies doing the best possible with this gimped economy. Now this is an interesting force mix, and this is where I thought Broke Open Skill, might have been a bit of trouble. Just going pure destroyer, it's not the best. I think the Armada destroyers are a little bit better than the Cortex ones in actual terms, because there's basically no stats different. They've got a faster swinging turret, so they can run away a bit better. They've got like 10 less range or something, just like negligible, particularly when you factor in that line of sight anyway, because they haven't got any herrings. So yeah, even though the T1 frigates aren't the best for Armada, I think they still have their place. Whereas we can see a much more balanced 2 ships. Where is everything? We can see a little bit more of a balanced force, but really White Lies, just from that bit of a sucky economy, just doesn't have enough ships on the board. Quite like what Broke Open Skill has done here by laying down a rattlesnake and getting the T1 constructor ships to knock it out. And this is what Resurrector subs are really good at, is perhaps where there's been random ships come down or different buildings, patrolling around and getting them rather safely. So perhaps it's always good to have one Resurrector sub. Okay, so 11 destroyers. To my mind, this is a really random defense to put this here. I guess it works. Open Skill's all about the long range firepower. So we see White Lies definitely does not have the forces, even though it's a better force mix. Clearly lacking tonnage. Less than half the destroyers, only 3 frigates and a dolphin. But they're closer to home, which means a quick few extra ships. As they travel down, fairly even trade, with Broke Open Skill giving away a lot of ships close to White Lies base. White Lies getting a bit of a surround bonus there. And these frigates just outperforming the destroyers pound for pound. We've even got the Resurrection subs repairing this destroyer back here. It wasn't a substantive win, like it was just good enough win. This wreck field would be, approaching 10,000, but still, finally got T2. And Broke Open Skill with the long range firepower comes in with the battleship. The baseline's sitting on about 78, and it's going to be hard to see, but 58. So it's still got a substantive lead, Broke Open Skill, despite White Lies capturing this fortress island. Got quite a random torpedo launcher matrix here. I guess wants to keep their economy somewhat safe. Now let's see how White Lies goes against the battleships. Getting reinforced in a timely manner. Battleships are actually pretty cool. They even look like wrecks despite they were not. They were like wrecks in the making. So the too far forward rally point was the issue here. Bringing down all these support ships and getting them killed. Neat surround bonus. White Lies punching above his weight. This is the part where I was looking at right here. After these battleships went down, I thought, wow, White Lies absolutely has this. But I guess that Tech 2 shipyard is starting to swing into action. Whereas I'm not sure White Lies is capitalising on all these wreck fields. In fact, we've got Broke Open Skill stealing some metal. What's the Hermetic saying? As above, so below. So this right here is where Broke Open Skill has changed the game with one resurrection sub, perhaps reclaiming it. So the issue with packing too many frigates is not having this on hand to deal with any surprising submarines. It goes to show how good a T1 army is still against cruisers if they had that radar. Because they don't have that radar, it's not a substantive extra bonus. There we go. There's the radar from the herring. There's no really point moving away from lasers, although obviously to get the surround bonus is better. Unfortunately, these resurrection subs go down. Yeah, and that's where the momentum changes. So the 23-minute mark, you need to have built a T2 shipyard by now, and that might have been the difference. The extra efficiency of these T2 ships should not be underestimated. I'm not sure if I've done a comparison before. Let's compare it to a frigate, right? Because they're very similar to a frigate more than a destroyer, the cruiser in some ways. Because they haven't got the range, they've got very similar ranges, like 480 to 500. That's similar to a Riptide. We see the DPS is substantially more, 4 times as much. You know, sort of almost 4 times as much, depending on the range. The speed, of course, the frigate's much more. Whereas I guess the cruisers are the frigates of T2, whereas the battleships are like the destroyers, or even the flagships, I guess. No, definitely more battleships, because the flagships, you know, almost something else. And so if we compare the health of the frigate compared to the cruiser, it's 2.5 times or so the health. So you combine 4 times the DPS by 2.5 times the health, and you just put them in as a multiplier. And the fact that the lasers always hit, right? And so you might as well say that's 6 times the damage in actuality to a frigate. Even though they're very good, the frigates, that's like, 18 times multiplier on the frigate. It doesn't really sound right, does it? That it's 18 times better for pretty much twice the cost, a little bit more, maybe 2.5 times the cost. But whatever it is, they're much better than what it would appear. I would argue here that's probably been the biggest difference between them both. Not even the economy, although that has certainly played a part. It's really been this upgrade to Tech 2, which is assisted by the economy, of course. Let's see how this line of cruisers go. Look at these lasers. They're just a lot more effective than it appears, with the only advantage of the T1 Navy basically being able to sort of sit outside of range, barely. And so that's why Broke Open Skill does stop, rather than gift ships. It's going to gift it anyway. So we're just sort of seeing mishandling cause the loss of those ships more than anything. And because we have this giant number of T2 cruisers, the metal field's okay, of course backed by this resurrection sub army, reclaiming like crazy. Oh, they're in danger. No micro or anything. Finally we see the T2 cruisers come out. I'm not sure what happened to those resurrector ships from Broke Open Skill. They all got sacrificed. Yeah, actually these battleships are bad news. They are very expensive though, at 3,300 metal. Oh, that is a big sacrifice. They can't get too close to these cruisers. But the enemy has T2 cruisers as well, and their substantial health and damage carries the day. So it just does come down to a numbers game and how the economies happen to this point with, T2 cruiser. Even though White Lies has responded with the battleship, it's just been one step behind all the time. Although this is a very good use of the battleships, staying off the cruisers enough to be annoying. But really, what are you going to do against a line of this? In the end, really economy won this for Broke Open Skill, and it wasn't even that much of a macro intensive economy. Oh no, maybe I missed this APHIS. So no, what was adding up in the end. Broke Open Skill was scaling. And that's what this game is a little bit like. Even if your micro is not quite on point, you do get these units sometimes which favour you no matter what micro you use, like the cruiser. And you don't need it if you're spending enough time scaling. The waste from the bad micro is made up for the scaling. Not always with wreck yards. And this is why it's important to have those resurrected submarines come in and scoop all these wrecks up to make up for that shortfall in economy. That was very well fought by White Lies. Alright, so that concludes the video about C. I didn't end up getting to land too much on the end and what happened here. It's usually a bit of a shit show anyway, and sort of, yeah, see you have hounds versus, you know, ranged units, and that's what it turns into, till the big boys can weigh in and sort of change the dynamic. Yeah, so thanks very much for watching, and leave a comment or a like if you enjoy the content, and if you picked up a tip or trick, you know, do tell me so I know what to advise on in the future. As far as I'm concerned, you're probably a noob watching this video, but if you're more an experienced player, let me know if this was helpful too, and that will give me some guidance for the future. Alright, thank you very much, and see you next time.